think you've seen scares? Get ready for the horror of the hyena woman. You often hear a lot of these conspiracy theorists talking about how there are these elites who want to make it where no one owns anything. And according to these conspiracy theorists, these elites are going to make it where no one owns anything and they are going to be happy about it. Well, I believe that these elites are going to be extremely disappointed when they find out what happens when people don't own anything. Now, when somebody does not own anything, guess what? Nobody cares about anything. And because they don't care about anything, they don't look to maintain anything that's around, and that leads to a complete decline in the quality of life of all of those people in that society. Now, if you want to take a textbook example of what happens when people don't own anything, all you have to do is go to an inner city area where there is Section 8 housing. Now, as somebody who grew up in a neighborhood where there was such housing and lived in such housing, I know for a fact what happens when people don't own anything. When people don't own anything, they just don't care about anything. And they don't care about anything because they have nothing invested in that property, because they don't own anything in that apartment building. They don't really care what happens to things like security doors or common areas like the vestibules, and they turn these common areas of the building into a complete mess where there's garbage strung around and there's just filth practically everywhere. And in the case of security doors, they're constantly breaking them because they don't own any of the property there. And since they don't own anything, there's no reason for them to care about that property. So what you're going to see on a scaled up level is the same type of dysfunction that you see in inner city neighborhoods. That's what you're going to see if these elites go out here and make it where people don't own anything. You're not just going to have a small community of people who don't care about their communities. You're going to have an entire world filled with people who don't care about anything because they don't own anything. And since they don't own anything, nothing has any value to them. And because nothing has any value to them, it doesn't matter whatever happens to whatever they have. So your elites will have their society. Oh, nobody owns anything, but they're the ones who aren't going to be happy because they're the ones who are going to have to try to maintain their society, and they're going to have to try to maintain their society without the support of the people. And the reason why they won't have the support of the people is because these people won't have anything invested in anything, and nothing will matter to them because they don't own anything, so they don't really care what happens to anything around them. Again, we go back to the inner city and you see what happens in a neighborhood where nobody owns the apartments but the city and the state. And in these Section 8 housing, you have a lot of buildings that are in constant disrepair. You have people who really don't take care of anything as related to maintaining any sort of property. And you have people who have no incentive to take care of anything because everything is going to be taken care of by someone else. And because it's being taken care of somebody else, they have no sense of personal accountability, and that is something that is paramount as related to ownership. Ownership means that you are accountable for what happens on your property, and it means that you are going to have an incentive to want to maintain that property because that property has value to you. And as a wealth building asset that you own, you want to make sure that that asset is maintained so that you can go out here and be able to resell said tangible asset for a higher price or at least the price you paid for it. So you have an economic incentive to go out here and take care of that property because you have ownership of that property. I mean, it's basically like one of these action figures here. I have a responsibility to maintain this tangible item because this tangible item may possibly have wealth in the future and may be a wealth building asset because as long as there's somebody who wants this item, there's a reason for me to maintain it and keep it clean, keep the joints tight, and not really do things that lead to it being broken because I own this tangible item and I want to be able to give this tangible item to somebody else or sell this item to somebody else in exchange for money. That is basically what happens when people own assets. And when you take assets away from an individual and put it in the hands of another individual, that individual has no incentive to go out here and maintain that item. And again, this scaled up on a global scale just turns the world into one big ghetto. And these people who come up with these kind of theories, again, they don't live in places like I do, like the South Bronx, where you see what happens when people don't own anything. What happens is they don't take care of the property because the property is not theirs. They have no responsibility for the property, and whatever happens to the property is on the state. It is not on the people. But when people own property, what happens is they have an investment in that property, and because they have an investment in that property, they have an incentive to go out here and take care of that property, and they also have an incentive to maintain that property so that they can maintain a standard for their community, and they also have an incentive to go out here and protect that property because they want to maintain a quality of life. Moreover, because all of these individuals have a standard for their community as related to maintaining it, they want to maintain a quality of life for themselves. And because they want to maintain a quality of life for themselves, they are going to go out here and insist that the community meets a certain standard. That means if all the people in the neighborhood own property, what they're going to do is make sure that their lawns are maintained, make sure that their house has a clean paint on the front or the bricks are pointed. They are going to make sure that the sidewalks are clean. They're going to make sure that the neighborhood meets a standard for everybody's life, and they're going to make sure that the quality of life for everyone is consistent so that everybody can have the same quality of life. That's what happens when people are invested in their community because of ownership. When people don't own anything, they just don't care. And I've seen this firsthand when I was living in the South Bronx, and I still live in the South Bronx, and I see what happened when people don't own anything. They basically just take what they have and they take it for granted, and they think, oh, somebody else will go out here and fix this refrigerator, somebody else will go out here and fix this sink, and then they go out here, somebody will fix this door. So I don't have to care about anything being broken because somebody else is going to be responsible for it. But when you are an owner, you have an incentive to take care of what you own, and you have an incentive to go out here and make sure everything is up to a certain standard. I know this as a business owner for the last 10 years, and I have a standard that I want to maintain on my SJS Direct Imprint for the quality of the books that I publish. I know as a business owner, I have an incentive to go out here and take care of the quality of my books to make sure that they are the best that they can be, because I want to make sure that my customers get the best quality experience. But when somebody doesn't own anything, you get situations like what we're seeing in the comic book industry right now. Because many of the people in the comic book industry are resentful at the fact that they don't own any intellectual property and are not getting any of the wealth. They have no incentive to go out here and bring their best stories to publishers like Marvel or DC Comics. And when people don't own anything, they don't give you their very best work. No, they give you half done work because they have nothing invested that they own in whatever enterprise is out there. So, ownership is important to a society because when you have ownership, people have an incentive to go out here and care about what they do, and they have an incentive to go out here and work to do their best. And when people own things, they have an incentive to compete. So, ownership and competition, these are two key things to developing a strong society. Because ownership means a person has an incentive to care about what they do, and competition means that they want to step up their game and do their best. When people don't own anything, they don't care, and that's why you see so many guys who are drifting in places like the inner city, and many of these people, they are just wasting away their lives as they exist. And they're existing because they have no sense of purpose, and they have no sense of purpose because they don't own anything. I know from growing up in the South Bronx what it means to be when a guy has no purpose. What he does is he drifts aimlessly, and all he does is go out here starting beefs and fights in the street over nothing, or he's fighting over the attention of females because he has no incentive to go out here and do better. So you have these so-called elites out here, as the conspiracy theorists allege, talking about, oh, nobody's going to own anything. Well, you wouldn't want to live in that society, because when you have a society of people who don't own anything, you have no incentive to maintain things like law and order, and you have no incentive for people to establish things like structure. A society where nobody owns anything eventually turns into anarchy, and that anarchy eventually comes to those elites who sit there and say, oh, we're going to make it where nobody owns anything. Well, if nobody owns anything, then nobody needs to follow your leadership. That is the other part that many of these elites, as the conspiracy theorists allege, don't understand. If nobody owns anything, nobody has an incentive to see you as somebody powerful, because they don't own anything, and they aren't going to be happy because a person who doesn't own anything has no purpose. A person who owns nothing basically just exists for nothing. And if you have a place where nobody owns anything, nobody cares about anything, not even their own life. And one of the worst things you could ever do to a person is put them in a situation where they have absolutely nothing to lose. That's why ownership is important to a society, because if people have something to lose, then they have, again, another reason to care. So when people don't own anything, they have nothing to lose, nothing to care about, and your hierarchies mean absolutely nothing to them. So it's a very dangerous thing to put people in a place where they will own nothing or propose these ideas and say people will be happy with about this, because a people without a purpose are a very dangerous people, and people who again own nothing, have nothing to lose, and a person again with nothing to lose doesn't care about anything, even the lives of all of the people around them. Now, one of my viewers wanted me to go into this subject, and if you want me to talk about a certain subject, you can donate to the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you could go out here and pick up some of the books on the SJS Direct Imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy, that would be greatly appreciated. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Coming to paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. The sorority secrets from the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Pre-order your copy of ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com today.